All right, let's kick it off. It's 2 minutes after the hour, and we want to respect your time. So good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Lou Ebley, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. Right now, Experis Cyber is presenting our Zero Trust webinar. And as far as personally, my introduction is I work for Manpower Group, and for the last 5 years as their Global Information Security Officer. I have over 30 years of experience in IT and information security, and I look forward to our call today. On the panel, we have three people who I'm very, very proud to introduce to you, or they'll be introducing themselves. And we'll start with Boss Matt, and then go to Lior and Mike.
Hello, I'm Busmat Libovsky. I'm head of managed cybersecurity services at Experis Cyber. We have been providing monitoring and control services to customers around the world for the past 9 years in the areas of managed SIEM SOC, SOAR, MDR, IR, and so forth.
Thank you, Basmat. Lior?
Hi everybody. My name is Lior Marom, and I'm the CISO of Cybersixgill, company who provide the cyber threat intelligence platform solutions in the cybersecurity arena for a few years. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Lior. And Mike?
Hey, thanks, Lou. Hey, folks. My name is Mike Kehoe. I am the program director for IBM Security Software Solutions across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I'm coming to you today from a Dublin city, which we're just cleaning up the mess that we had over the weekend, which was St. Patrick's Day. So we're going to get back into action here. But yeah, it was a good weekend, one of our big events of the year.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike. And again, just setting the expectations for our call today. We're looking at 45 minutes in total. Obviously, we can run longer or shorter as needed. Now, we're going to be covering 3 topics, and your lines are muted. However, we have the chat session open in Zoom, and please share any questions you have or any feedback as we're going through this, and we'll answer those questions at the end of the call. So again, we appreciate your time, we respect your time, and we expect that you're going to have a eventful 45 minutes. And I just want to start with a brief history of Zero Trust. And Zero Trust through the ages has existed within our IT environment for decades. Originally, it was just to protect the perimeter of our environments. But then as technology grew and as we have more dynamic and complex environments, and we're now in a no trust way of the world. And basically, so I grew up in the mainframe environment, and I imagine many of you have not shared that experience, but in the mainframe environment, the original security that was available was security that said you allowed everybody access to everything, and then you would then create rules to block people from access. What we are now in a no trust environment, Zero Trust, is that nobody has access unless they're granted access. And that's really, that is the way that you protect yourself. That is the way that, previously, when it was the opposite way, where everybody had access unless you blocked them, people would have inadvertent access. And now with Zero Trust, it's a much more safe and secure environment. Panelists, anything to add there?
Lou, like what you'd said, you've got plenty of experience. You've seen this evolve over the last few decades. And when I was talking with the panel recently, I said, well, I've also seen this happen in other industries, where we've seen it happen with zero defect in the car manufacturing industry, say in Japan, where they knew that to progress their industry, they had to do something radically different to beat the American car manufacturing. And their item was, how do I change the way I operate in my car manufacturing, that I can build systems that can remove quality defects, down to what they came up with a new metric, which they call ppms, part per million. But the philosophy was the same. The approach was the same. It was this maniacal focus on, there has to be a way where I can increase my business operation, but decrease the amount of problems that my business generates because of this opportunity. And therefore they realize that zero defect is the way. This is identical in the IT systems. How can we continue to increase our value to our clients and to our business by harnessing IT operations, but by not giving the bad guys those opportunities to be able to abuse us? So very, very similar types of thinking and very, very similar types of approaches, even though they're radically different industries.
Yeah, exactly. And, all industries and all businesses, they want to get to a zero defect. And obviously, that's the car example is great. And the example for mainframes, Lior, Basmat, anything to add to this before we move on to our first topic?
Yes, so just to say something more about that, following what you mentioned regarding not trusting anyone. So Zero Trust brought us to the place where we understand that we cannot trust not partners, not suppliers, not employees, anyone. Because we understand today that we cannot grant privileges to anything within the network, because there's always the possibility of insider threats or an attacker that infiltrated into the network. And so I think that when we look at one of the things that raise the awareness to Zero Trust is maybe the supplier chain attacks that have spiked during the recent years, but mostly during 2022. So if we look at that, we can see that even every supplier that is connected to our system is increasing the risk 1,000-fold, either by their not following prudent security standards or being connected to other vendors that can gain access through them into our network. I can share a use case of one of our customers that experienced such an attack exactly because of not applying the least privileges principle and the segmentation properly within the network. So do we have time? Can I proceed with that?
Absolutely, please.
Okay, so we had a customer that has granted a DBA from a third-party access rights that has, it was high access rights, so they had already been able to access many resources within the network. And this DBA's credentials were stolen. Like, we can expect it to happen. Sure. And the attacker gained access into the network of the customer. And because the segmentation was not applied ideally, they managed to get into the domain controller. And when you get into the domain controller, I mean, it's like a checkmate, right? So they stole all the hash, all the user hashes, and luckily they were monitored. So we saw that something is going on, and we alerted them. And we have a response, an incident response team that started to, to look into what is going on, and of course, disconnected the domain controller, and the attacker could not do anything with the hashes. But of course, it was followed by cleaning and recovery and all the stages that need to be followed. But this customer, of course, is now implemented exactly those two key foundations of segmentation and least privileges to every user, because we don't want users that don't have access or shouldn't have access to critical systems being able to, of course, access them. It can be either by recklessness or just not understanding what they're doing or whatever. So we need to be very strict on these two key principles.
Yeah, Okay, Basmat, yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, so we're jumping right into the first topic, which is the implementation of zero trust, now in the year 2023. And, in discussing that implementation, we'll discuss the approaches and methodologies that, that we're familiar with and the complexities in the journey that we all face. So, Lior, I know you have extensive background in implementation. So if you could walk us through what your experience is and discuss that, please.
Okay, thanks. So here in our company, we implemented zero trust solutions. Definitely, we have to look and to understand that we need to change the approach that we are looking about access control. It's not just anymore that, okay, we are allow or not disallow to employee or other third party to gain access to our assets, to our data. We have to push more effort about access control, especially when we are talking about cloud services. We're pushing and moving to the cloud. So we must adopt and give more effort about on access controls and hardening them. And what we did actually, when we go to this project, we ask ourselves what we want to see, what is the KPI, what are the main goals, and especially that we are looking at a few components about zero trust. First of all, who is getting access to my data, to my system? We have to check it. So we must see that, must sure that our zero trust solution supporting it's basic, but I surprised that not all the vendors support this capability of host checking. Okay, that for example, my Mac or my laptop is allowed to connect to my resources. This is the first thing. The second thing that we did, and we adopt the approach that we split our services, basically that we are working on Kubernetes, so and on microservices. We split all these, all those microservices to little big pieces, and we give the permission per microservice, not just, okay, welcome to the cloud, to our AWS environment, for example. Now go and do whatever you want. No, you have to gain an access to a specific microservices or specific server or VMware or data. It's not just, okay, we get access to anywhere and anywhere. So it's a lot of work, but at least you do it one, you are on the host and you can run and make trust. Of course, supporting the MFA and SSO, whatever it takes to make it more secure. And another thing that we saw that another problem that SaaS companies, I think, have suffered is the all the environment of accessing to production environment. We know that our R&D teams, the support team, the IT teams should get an access to debug problems, to make an update, to make a pull request of new features, and on and on. But definitely we have to understand the production environment is like the old and the native data center that no one is there. Okay, unless there is a specific reason and we understand this reason. And this is how we look about zero trust. And another point that we take a look on zero trust, and especially on access control to those environments. At least I give you the permission to gain an access. It doesn't really matter, and it doesn't say nothing that you're truly needed. Because if, for example, I given an executive member of my management, for example, the CTO or other V-level or C-level, I gave him an access, and now I can count the number that he usually use this access. So if, for example, I can count and see that, okay, he uses this access one time in 6 months, so eventually he doesn't need this access, so let's move it on. At least he needed this access, to do what he needs to do, and I know he can get an access, okay, we'll give it separately and for a different time, and especially for time zone, for example, 1 hour to 2 hour, but after that, okay, let's close everything. And of course, the next phase is about, when we're talking about machine to machine access control, that should be about trusted way. And I think it's increased dramatically our way that we are thinking about accessing to those assets and the data and systems. This is in generally.
Yeah. Yeah. So Lior, you know, like every company is in a different stage. So if you were involved with a company that said, okay, that their strategy for 2023 was to get to a mature zero trust state, what do you have a checklist that you can run through, or is there, like, where do you, like, what questions do you ask to get them in a position where they know what they need to do, next steps?
Basically, the initial thing is to map all the assets and map all the data and systems, first of all. And then we have groups, we have user, we can mapping them. We can go to see the old and the good RBAC model that say role-based access control, who can get an access to where.
Sure.
And after that, we want to see this asset and to see if we can break through the assets or split the assets to a few assets. If I'm talking about, for example, about servers, not server anymore. If on this server there's a few application, for example, so let's split it for different application.
Yeah.
If we're talking about Kubernetes, for example, okay, let's split it to microservices, because developer don't need to get an access to all the microservices at the same time, right? So let's see. And after that, we have to map and to understand the frequency of the access control needed day by day. For example, if I have a developer that is working on an environment of few microservices, I don't need to give him any day, every new day, another permission day by day. The IT will crash from that. So we have to understand that. The next phase is to see how what is the next what should be the policy to get through those assets. So, example,
Okay.
we have our endpoint protection, we have the disk encryption, Windows update, Mac update, Apple update, Mac update, doesn't really matter, and all other policies that we require from our resources to get in. And after that, we can go to the POC and go to a group, let's call it pilot group. Okay, just
Right.
get them the feedback how it goes, and this is the main idea.
Yeah, and we call it a journey, so we know we're never done. So, yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, Mike, I know you've had experience as well for implementing and supporting zero trust.
Yeah, so probably different from Lior. We're IBM is there to help the client start their journey. So we're not the practitioner, we're the teacher in the environment. So really what we have to say in that when we look at well, how do you start to implement a zero trust strategy? Well, as I think the speakers have said, there are three main principles. The principles would be least privilege, which Lior talked about and Boss Matt talked about. In other words, you start with saying nobody has access to anything, and then you have to start to say, you say, well, when do you need it? How do you need it? What do you need? Why do you need it? And those questions get asked constantly. It's not like, okay, there you go, go, because we change. So that's the first thing. So it's constant movement on that. Then the next principle of zero trust is trust no one. So even though, and it was funny, I'll give you another little story. I was in a bar in Seattle a good few years ago, just at the smoking ban, and of course they carded us going into the bar. And of course so therefore they checked our ID. So that was identity access management to the bar. And then one of my buddies said he'd like to go out for a cigarette, so we went out for a cigarette, and it was during the afternoon. And we were the only people in the bar, and the bouncer let us out, and we were talking to him, and he was saying, "Where are you guys from?" We explained it. And then as we turned around to go back in the bar, he said, "Stop, can I see your ID?" And we go, "Hang on, you saw us come out. You can see our beers." And he goes, "Yeah, but it's policy." So that was zero trust in action. He didn't trust us. He carded us again.
Yeah.
And you might think, well, that's overkill, but it's not, because say if somebody, the bouncer had changed, or somebody else had looked like me, came in but was underage. So zero trust means you don't trust anybody, regardless of what you perceive their relationship is with the business. And then you have to take a look at assume a breach. So that hunger should never go away. That hunger of trying to find somebody should go away. The bad guys are waiting you to get distracted or let your guard down.
Yeah. Always. Yeah.
Those three items about zero trust in relation to the principles of least privilege, trust no one, and assume a breach. Once you build them into your philosophy, then you start to see them radiate through all your thinking and so on. And what IBM then does, and we do have a zero trust workshop, and you can reach out to me and we can definitely show you how we do that. It's usually a day to 2 days at our customer base free of charge. But we start looking at the base use cases, and the base use cases will be things like remote working, because we all went home in 2020, and suddenly you don't have the understanding of who's accessing your solutions from a point of view of physical. You just don't see them. They're not working beside you anymore. So that has really opened up a lot of opportunity for bad guys, and therefore knowing second factor authentication, privileged access, identity access is really, really key, and constantly watching that. Other use cases would be things like protecting the cloud. Again, it's not our servers in our basement anymore inside our own firewall. We sometimes are rent the hardware and it's outside.
Exactly. Yeah.
How do we wrap our focus on our protection around servers externally? Remember, the server people who are providing that to us, well, their motivation is to make a profit by renting service to us. Well, our motivation is to keep ourselves safe. So we have a conflict of interest there. So we got to pick that up. And then things like insider, as everybody said, the bad guys don't come from external. Sometimes you can have some bad apples, and therefore they might have the privilege, they might have the access to our systems. And we just have to say, well, can I smell the smoke? And then can I find the fire? So, and that gets back then to the assume a breach. In other words, it's not just the guys from North Korea or the guys from Russia that are looking to come into our system. Unfortunately, we might have one or two bad apples as well, who might be motivated or accidental, but still expose us. So it really is, don't give up and just keep focusing on what you're trying to do.
Yeah. And Mike, I didn't hear you mention bring your own BYOD. So is that so that's another layer of complexity that we all have to deal with.
Without a doubt, we want to be able to BYOB, and clearly with the customers, we don't want to say, hey, as long as you have a Nokia 6310, you can deal with us. Well, Nokia 6310s are great in their day, but they don't exist anymore. So we have to let clients come with different platforms, and we have to, and again, if we start saying, oh, there's third factor authentication and put in your 18-bit rotating password, people are going to go, you know what, I don't want to do business with you anymore. So you have to be able to weigh up what is
they still have to work, sure.
With our security, and that gets really, really problematic, because you have user experience should be seamless, but security should be 100%. Really, really difficult thing to keep pushing forward. But must be, because the bad guys are looking for you to give up and go, that's it. I'm not going to do it.
Right, they never give up, like you said.
They don't give up.
No, not at all. Basmat, anything to add?
No, I think it was very well put regarding the key factors or the key principles of zero trust. So the only question is, okay, so you put all the controls in place, you're constantly reviewing privileges. So are you covered as best as you can? Is someone looking to see what is going on? Someone, like, as Mike said, a bad apple is doing something that is not legitimate. So this is something we need to implement above the usual controls, the controls we spoke about in regards to zero trust, but needs to be in addition to someone who is constantly vigilant and looking into your systems.
Right. Excellent. Yeah, totally agree. Lior, after hearing, you started things off, but Michael and Basmat, is there anything you want to add before we go on to our second topic?
Yes, regarding what Bosmat just mentioned now, I think this is going to be the next generation of the zero trust approach that, okay, now you get an access, but let's see what you can do with this access. So
Yeah.
I think additionally, this is going to be the big advantage that put focus, especially on gain access on very sensitive access and of course, very sensitive data. So to see what's going on. And another, the last list point that I want to speak about it is the implementation of segregation of duty to gain an access, to allow access. Okay, it's not just, for example, to go to, let's think about our database, administrator portal. Okay, administrator portal. It's not just me as a CISO can give you an access. I want that maybe the VP R&D will also give you the access because it's very sensitive. So we can implement the approach of segregation of duties. So I think it also can be the biggest advantage.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you all. And again, as a reminder, you can add questions into the chat and we'll read them out and answer them at the end of the call. So moving on to our second topic for today, and that is using a SOC for a more mature zero trust strategy. As you've heard, zero trust is something that we always have to be vigilant 24/7. It's something that requires expertise, it requires solutions. And again, it's to get to a mature place to protect your environment. We want to discuss how a SOC can assist in that. So Bosmat, I'll turn that over to you to start the discussion.
Okay, so basically, as we said before, once we implement all the controls, all the layer of security, there's still a need to look at the activity in the network constantly, because it can either be an insider threat, it can be by accident, it can be anything else that can cause damage to the organization. So the sooner we catch that, the sooner we can mitigate the damage or stop it completely. So a SOC service, if it's fine-tuned and built according to the requirement of the organization, can provide three major advantages. The first one is clarity, meaning that you know which devices you have in the network, you know what communication is going on, you know who is doing what. And we encountered customers that when we started connecting their devices, the security devices, at least the firewall, the Active Directory, and so on, to the SIEM, they suddenly discovered all kinds of bits and pieces left in the network that nobody remembered about, because people change, because there is, a kind of, if it's a large company, then there's all kinds of departments doing all kinds of stuff. So when we start to monitor, when we start connecting the key devices to the SIEM, it gives clarity. You start to see the communication that is going on and who is doing what, and it gives you an opportunity to make order to start closing all the gaps. The second thing that a good SOC service can give you is the vigilance. There's always someone 24/7, 365 days a year, watching the system, watching what is going on, getting alerts about suspicious activity. So this is something that is that is very valuable in terms of responding quickly to evolving cyber events. And of course, it can be escalated from tier 1 to tier 2 to incident response team and so forth. But the immediate response is very important. And the third advantage is peace of mind, because if the playbook is very well tuned and the alerts are very well tuned, the rules are very well tuned, so the people that needs to be alerted are alerted only about things that really require the attention. They are not alerted about false positives or duplicates, and it's very tiring to deal with constant alerts. So it has to be very, very fine-tuned. And when we provide as an MSSP service to customers, we make sure that we go with them every month on fine-tuning the alerts. See if they added new systems that need new rules, check with them if personnel has changed, and so forth, so we can only alert them about what needs their attention, even if it's at 2 a.m. at night. But they know that when they get a phone call at 2 a.m. at night, they need to respond because something is going on.
Right. Okay. Now, do you have specific use cases that you've seen?
Well, we have a lot of use cases about that, but
Unfortunately, right?
yeah, but I can speak about one specific use case that was really a big win for us. We started connecting the critical security devices of a new customer, a very large company in Israel. And immediately as we start, looking at the logs that started to flow from the firewall and from the Active Directory, we saw very suspicious activity. And we alerted them. And we discovered through the logs that there was a server that was open to the internet via RDP. And they said, okay, bring us your response team. We want you to take care of that. And when we connected to the server, we saw that was the mouse was moving, right? Because there was an AnyDesk session open. So we immediately disconnected the server. And when we started to check it, we saw that there were several tools installed on it, like PSExec and Mimikatz that were, ready to deploy ransomware. So it was Medusa ransomware, just yeah. But it was there. The attacker was ready to deploy the ransomware across their systems, and we just spoiled its plan at the last minute. So it was a very, very, very lucky customer.
Yeah, very good, very good. Lior, I know you've had experience as well working in the SOC. What can you add to this?
I think the main challenge in SOC is to understand what you want to see and to understand what kind of correlation you can achieve from plug-in logs from all your system, and to see what kind of incident you wish to realize, to understand that your SOC team can push you in, and how can help, and of course the remediation process, and to buy the right after that the right playbooks, and of course to train the team, and to make sure that everything is in place, because in theory, everything is work on the paper, everything is great, but at least you are figure it out, and training, you can find a problem, and so you make sure that everything is out there. And before you are implementing SIEM SOC solutions, SOC service, of course, you have to map your critical business processes and make sure all the elements that support those processes are totally logged, and the SOC team can watch them.
Okay. All right. Is the primary benefit that you have found, is there anything that rises to the top?
Yeah, as Busmat said, the first, the guys there 24/7. For me as a CISO, I'm trying to catch a sleep from time to time, but it's good. It's good, the guys are working, doing their work great, and understand what they need to do. And when we are mapping the playbooks, there is a few, there's a few tired that we define with the SOC team, and most of the incidents are handled by the SOC team. So it gives us allow to put a focus to continue protecting our environment and our data. And so I found it very, very helpful, and for me as a CISO, not just in SOC, although in other component of cybersecurity and also privacy, I love to learn what other people doing, what other company doing, because the knowledge is not just sitting on my case or just in a smart case or other experience case. So I want to learn from everyone. So if they can share the knowledge from other customers, say, okay, Leo, look what we found in other customers. We recommend to do like that and like that, so it can be very helpful. And so this is what about the sharing knowledge is so expanded. It's so, I think, priceless.
Yeah. I remember back in the day when I was implementing in various at various companies, you could pick and choose. You would always find something, that one company did that you could then correlate into another company and lessons learned type of thing. And I think, the SOC allows you to do that as well. Mike, your experiences, please.
Yeah, a couple of questions came in from the audience in relation, and really good points about, is there a regulatory body that defines what zero trust is or not? No, there's not. In fact, actually, in 2021, May 21st, the federal government in the United States said that all its contractors, from a security point of view, have to be zero trust enabled. And pretty much the next day, everybody put zero trust on the website, no definition, including ourselves. So I'll put up a hand. Okay. But it's not an aspiration. It's like the speed of light. The closer you get to the speed of light, the harder it is to get there. So it really is a philosophy. You trust nobody and you assume a breach. And no matter how good you are, there is always room for improvement. So it gets back to the zero defect principle, which is continual process improvement. And we talk, like Bossmat talked about, using source systems or using business process management. When I talk with my clients, I always look at the very last step in a workflow, and the very last step should be lessons learned. No matter what you do in the SOC, you just stop the guy coming in, so they've been able to get through a certain level of your defenses. Therefore, you miss something. Go back and lessons learned, and make sure you plug that hole. So, in other words, you're not perfect, and therefore therefore, the thing about there's no such thing as a perfect zero trust. It'll always creep in.
Yes.
But you be maniacally focused on, I do not accept vulnerabilities and I don't affect offenses. Now, the next thing, what was a really good question was, what about when you should review policies? You should review zero trust means continual process improvement. And remember we talked about always assume a breach and trust nobody. If you don't feel comfortable, you should be checking your policies, period. Because there's no such thing as do it every 6 months, do it every 9 months. It's you need to get to a level where you believe that you're closing the vulnerability gap as best you can, but you're never there. Which kind of brings me on to another point. We see the rise in solutions called ASM, attack surface management, where people now have become comfortable in what they've done in their EDR systems, endpoint detection, but they're not confident. So they want red teaming automated systems to constantly look for shadow IT, where somebody has built something they shouldn't have, or where a certificate is dead, or where a platform has probably run out of its support. So again, it is a philosophy, and in build philosophy is a slight leaning towards I'm a little bit paranoid. I'm never
you need
one
to
of,
be, yes.
I'm not one perfect. Again, there's no such thing as perfect. And therefore you build that, but you build it in across your organization. It's not the CISO's responsibility to sit there, he or she can't sleep at night. You're building it into this maniacal focus on, we don't accept vulnerabilities. We constantly want to strive to do better. Because here's the great thing, bad guys are an organized crime. And once they find it too difficult to penetrate you, they're just going to move down the street. So you always want to make sure the guys down the street don't become more problematic and they come back to you. You just want to have that attitude in you. So it's people against people. Bad guys are people, we're people.
Yeah, agreed. And it'll never be 100%, as you said. So, assuming that, you mentioned it, assume that there's a breach and somebody's in there. What do you recommend for limiting your attack surface? What do you put in place?
Unfortunately, with breach, there are 4 R's that can affect you. The loss of revenue, which means someone steals credit cards, you have to replace your client's data. There is reputation. If people think that like a general merchandising store in the United States a few years ago lost data for their clients and people stopped going to their store. So there's reputation, there's revenue, there's runtime. If somebody ransomwares your solution, you can't run your operations. But the final one, which if the regulators didn't exist, nobody would care. So if data got stolen and nobody fined you for that, or like GDPR or HIPAA, nobody would care. But the regulators are there, and they are there to say, if you lose personal data, we are going to fine you. And you've seen people like Facebook recently been fined in over 400 million in the loss of data, or not protecting their data. So the regulators aren't mucking around. So again, a few years ago, if you lost data, you go, sorry about that. Not anymore. You will come foul of the regulators, and they will increase the type of fine. So therefore, even with when you have a slow entry, you have to make sure there's not a slow exit. So therefore, catching the bad guys as early as possible, because not only will you will have to plug that hole, but you could come foul of significant fines from regulators. So there's huge motivation for us as cyber defenders to protect against the 4 R's.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Mike. Before we move on, Basmat, you had a chance to listen to Lior as well as Mike add on to what you had said. Is there anything additional that you'd like to share from a SOC standpoint and Zero Trust?
Well, not currently. No, nothing comes to mind.
Okay. All right. Very good. So, and I know we're up against what we had said, the 45 minutes, but if you can bear with us, we will, our third topic was data leak prevention, DLP, which is, something that absolutely is near and dear to my heart. I've rolled out DLP in 3 organizations, and it's something that it protects you so that you know where your data is, what your data is, and where it's going. And it's a key element of maturing your zero trust environment. So Mike, I'd like to lead off with you as far as DLP. You're on mute, Mike.
Oh, it doesn't turn into the Mike show, but it is all about what I just talked about. It's about protecting that data, because if that data can be monetized, and therefore it becomes a really valuable asset to yourselves, but also to a cyber aggressor, it's the regulator that you'll come foul. And therefore you have to understand, as you said, who has access to data, why have they access to the data, what are they going to use it, where will they move it to? And that means you got to monitor all those transactions and understand them implicitly. So the less you can make the privilege, you can set the privileged access, the more you can control that. It's not just a free for all. So yeah, data is the new asset, super valuable asset in the organization. And if we don't look after it, we're going to damage our organization, and also we'll run foul of the regulators.
Sure. And I know that there have been many studies regarding breaches and data being lost, and 90% of it seems to come from phishing and comes from the email security. Do you have any experience with protecting data that leaves your environment, whether it's via a USB drive, via email, some kind of a file transfer? What's been your experience?
Well, I think that once data has leaked, of course it's it's after the fact and it's already leaked, but there are ways to follow it and find it. So maybe Lior, who is the CISO in such a company, can elaborate on that. But from our experience, we use Cybersixgill platform. And we already encountered customers' data that was leaked and was up for sale in certain malicious forms.
Yeah.
So it's important to know about it in order to take care of it.
Okay. All right. Lior, you want to add to that?
Yes. I think, the big advantage in those days that you have to follow the data, especially when we're talking about cloud services, that on the earliest day when we talk about databases, storage, it's sitting down in our data center out there on the DR or hosting space. But today, most of our data is out there on the cloud, and the big advantage is to follow the data. And the next thing is to classify the data. At least we understand that we can watch where the data is going, where it's going to, especially when we are talking about data flow diagrams, and to understand where the data is generated and where it make processing and where it's going out. At least we have a mapping of this situation and those processes. We can put our eye on the data. So this is the big advantage. Here in Cybersixgill, actually, what we are doing, we are digging deep in the dark web. We are finding a lot of pieces of data, for example, a compromised area, or also leaked credentials that getting out there, and also data that we can help the organization to understand, to realize what out there. Or for example, if there is hacker group or hacker acting or something like that want or wish to put their hands on data of specific company, at least they are start talking about it on the deep in the dark web. We can bring this alert in the early stage, so organization can keep themselves and see, okay, guys, they want to attack you. Be aware about that. We have a lot of use case about it. That we bring our customer those alert and say, okay, let's make sure our all data are covered and all of this. And there is another kind of data that we are not speaking about it too much, and we have to speak about it. It's the corporate data, not just the regular user data. It's important, of course, but the corporate data of the finance, the HR, the management, whatever it's take internally, we have to cover it also. And today I have to mention there is a few vendors that are giving good solution to keep those data. For example, that how can I know that one of my user is not upload financial data to his private Google Cloud, for example, or Microsoft Cloud, Dropbox, I don't know. So we have to implement solution like that also, and it's also related to access control, who can get an access to what, and about, of course, sharing private data and private with other third parties, and to block public sharing and mitigate those open gates, I call it. So we have to put big attention about it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. So, Mike, you're the one that kicked this off. You heard Basmat and Lior. Is there anything additional that springs to mind regarding DLP?
Keep your data.
Exactly. Your data is the liquid gold of a corporation. It's its number one asset after its people. And that's what the bad guys are after. They're either to encrypt it, do ransomware. They're either there to steal it, or if it's a state actor, they're there to destroy it. That's what they're looking. That's what take the blood of your organization out.
Yeah.
Another one point about regarding how to keep data. We see shine and increasing of company that's providing solution like data security posture management. It allows us to discover where the data is. For example, if one of my developer open S3 buckets in AWS and put there, I don't know, for some kind of reason, sensitive data, and I don't know about it. So this solution can help me to realize, okay, look what's going out there. And so I think we need to adopt solutions like that, automatically solution that actually enforce our internal policy to block it, to prevent it.
Okay. All right. So we have had a couple questions come in. I know Mike handled a couple of them. One, Basmat, when you were discussing about the discovery where you were able to see that one of the attackers was going to release ransomware. The question was, how did you know that? How, what was your investigative, and how did you discover that?
Okay, so we didn't know at first that they're going to deploy the ransomware. We saw suspicious activity within the firewall logs. And when we started to, the suspicious activity was mainly around admin failed login from all kinds of malicious IPs around the world, mainly from Russia. And so this was a red light. So we started to look into it. And I want to remind you that we only started to connect the devices. It was a new customer. We didn't even start to monitor them officially. And so we kind of jumped into the middle of the attack. So, but this thing just raised an alarm. And when we started to look into the server, we discovered through the firewall logs that there was a NAT, and the NAT was, referring to this server. And when we started to look into the server, we understood that there's someone connecting to it from the internet. And we immediately disconnected it. And when we started to do forensic on it, we saw that there were the Mimikatz and the PS exec and these tools and the Medusa ransomware ready to be deployed. And so we didn't know, just to answer it, in a short sentence, we didn't know in advance that it is a ransomware attack. We just got suspicious and started looking at it. And then finally we discovered that it was a ransomware attack in progress.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So Mike had answered the question as far as there being a governing body. Somebody posted that Cloudflare blog was discussing that there was need for a chief zero trust officer or a similar title like that. Now that's something that I have not heard of or thought of, but Mike, Lior, Basmat, any thoughts on that?
I heard about before. From my kind of point of view, I'm looking at that. No, this is the new branding of the guys who used to hold the access control permission. That's it. So I don't think so about maybe in big organization, but in SME organization, I'm not sure that this is needed.
And you don't want to give the responsibility to a single person, because then they think, oh, well, that's his or her responsibility to keep us safe. It's not. Zero trust philosophy of doing across the organization, and really be putting that into everybody rather than just saying, oh, it's his office, let him look after it, or let her look after it. Not the way to go.
Just from my point of view, just a custodian who's taking care the program, but the accountability and responsibility about access and about assets and data is the data owner, the asset owner. So that's it.
Yeah, exactly. It's getting back to the Japanese way of manufacturing. They have stand-up meetings every morning, the KSI meetings, just before the manufacturing floor, to say, how can I make the product better? That's at floor level all the way up. It's the way it should be done.
Yeah. Okay. Another question came in specific to the critical utility, power and process, and how zero trust could be prioritized within that industry. So, the critical.
I can take that because prior to my role, I spent 20 years in critical asset design systems. So manufacturing, power distribution. I'm an electrical power design engineer. We could talk for another hour on this, Lou. But yes, OT, or operational technology, is going to be big, because the bad guys have really gone against the financial institutions, the communication institutions, and these have defended. Now they're starting defending well. So now the next attack vector is going to be against those OT environments, which are more difficult to monetize, but they are much more vulnerable. And you're going to see OT now becoming the new flavor of the month for threat vectors. Actually, I've worked with the Finnish government recently, and there's been a lot of work on looking at critical access protection, because the Russians are not happy with the Finnish joining NATO. And clearly they've realized that they really need, they're concerned that the Russians will teach them a lesson. So I'm sorry to get geopolitical here, but these are real world examples that suddenly realize that the Cold War will become silicon based.
Well, it's interesting though. So you have that experience, so I'm sure you're going to be expecting somebody reaching out to talk to you. Another question that came in was, SOCs who are paying for an MDR for a small company, that can be a costly endeavor. So, a smaller company that wants to be security focused, but they don't have a huge budget, for a dedicated team and managed services. So, what recommendations do you have?
Well, of course, it should be outsourced. I mean, other than when you want to establish a SIEM SOC within the organization, there's a lot of investment initially, if I understand the question correctly. So you need the expertise, you need the people, you need to put them 24/7, you need to pay them around the clock, you need the technology, you need the understanding, the procedures, and so forth. So I think MSSPs and managed SIEM SOC can provide a very good answer in terms of cost effectiveness of this service, because we already invested the initial amount in technology, in people, in the activity, in the policies, and so forth. So it can be much more cost effective to outsource it to a good MSSP.
All right, thank you. Mike or Lior, anything to add? We've got a couple of minutes left. Is there anything to add to what Asmat said?
No.
Yeah, picking the MDR is all about your ownership strategy. So your strategy can be on-premise, which you own everything. It can be IPaaS, it can be PaaS or ISaaS, which means you just want to own the application, you want to rent the hardware, which is the AWS and the Google Clouds. Or you can go to a SaaS model, which means then you have the operational of the system, but you've completely rented the hardware and software. Or you can go to a complete MSSP, managed service provider, security service provider. It's all about ownership. And some people, such in national security and law enforcement, well, they'll want to keep that in-house and they'll want it in their basements for the main reason they're not going to share that data. While some organizations might be online, might go full MSSP. So it's all about ownership and how it fits into your ownership strategy. So there are 5 different ways of doing it. So I would definitely say that, yes, companies who are very much focused on their value add and don't want to be distracted by security, the managed service provider route is a great route to go.
Yeah.
But it all depends on ownership and in the responsibility of that ownership.
All right, thank you. All right, so we have 2 last questions that are tied together here, and we're right up against this time, but the question came up again about, is there an organization to prove zero trust, and Mike answered part of that, but yeah, so it is a maturity model, and it's really something that you need to read up on or talk to others, such as the people on the panel here, about where you stand. And again, it's a never-ending thing. So you might be a maturity level 3 currently, but you could slip to a 2 as the world gets more and more complex. So it's something that you need to be focused on. You need to continually review to see where you stand. And then so again, there is no certification body to do that. All you can do is get an independent third party to come in and look at your environment to be able to determine where you are, any holes that you have, and that's something that red team exercises, whatever it may be. That's always a good way to get an independent look at your particular environment. Again, we really appreciate, I appreciate the panel very, very much, and the sharing of their experiences and expertise. We had quite a few people, both via LinkedIn and online today, and we appreciate your attendance, and I'm sure you benefited from this. A recording will be sent out tomorrow with contact information for everybody that was on the panel, for you to reach out if there's any additional feedback or questions that you have. Please, again, feel free to reach out. And again, have a great rest of your day, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.